Even Kripke in Naming and Necessity keeps a semblance of immutability in names, while Russell's theory of names is a forerunner of Quine's ideas about language as linguistic units derived from association with objects or events, processes, etc. Temporal change and classes of objects in the world of perpetual change do present the idea that some universal designs for objects exist that precede any particular expression in the temporal world. One learns through particle physics that select forms do exist for quanta. Only a certain amount of energy may exist in particular orbits, and radiation or fusion exists to renormalize those atoms. In some regards, Plato was correct about a realm of forms in physics then, after all. Socrates, in spite of the brilliance of the realm of forms and laying the foundation of realism, as well as advancing the classification of word and objects, etc., the will to elevate a republic that isn't much more than primitive tribal rule is a regressive rather than a positive contribution to posterity. Modernity requires a discrete ad hoc processing of data and education. In ecospheric and social reality, the common coined a mass thought as they pursue their own self-interest, aware that several billion other people are doing the same thing and that there are unintended concatenated effects of those actions. The will of Socrates to subvert the Athenian democracy and have a regime of change against the will of the majority was a dank, dark side to the man. Socrates, like various supremacists throughout history, had political, personal, egoistic eudaimon calling him to put his fellow citizens in chains held by the few, the proud, and the rich, including himself, presumably. Socrates had an inclination to support revolt against the government and was thrice convicted of fomenting insurrection. His philosophical method was political organization to persuade others to extend to end existing government and subjugate the people. People that wish to subjugate one to political non-equal status are on the wrong side of things, morally speaking. The Athenian democracy was a utopian experiment, as much then as in 1776. Socrates sought to regress to a primitivist tribalism with philosopher, king, co-chiefs, Kshatriya warrior guardians, and helot slaves. He might have been designing a modern corporation or zaibatsu of immense size. Athens had no oppression by the majority. All citizens were free and voters. Slaves of whatever origin were that or dead. What could one in that time do with captives of war and others of one's tribe that one had contacted? In World War I, more than 50,000 soldiers died of blood poisoning from infected blisters, I believe. In the 5th century BC, human physical contact tended to be more violent because any contact was dangerous, medically speaking, as well as for other reasons of history. Jingoism officially was invented by the British, and they were an aristocratic, democratic hybrid. In 5th century BC Athens, war, newspapers, and radio had yet existed for jingoistic utility. If one had a sword or spear drill team, one could have a crash at the foes, of course, dash across the ground, and yet it always resulted in many deaths and killing off of proto-jingoists. The Spartans, very good at wargaming, were not invariably happy about going to the killing fields. Heck, even abscess tooth removal could be painful for 5th century BC do-it-yourselfers. Achilles earlier believed a warrior death was best. Yet it was swift, and life with cancer or a myriad other chronic diseases very common then were not. The Roman Emperor Sulla perished when worms rotted his guts enough that they fell out. The Athenian democracy wasn't terribly militaristic either. I think that you have imbibed some more 20th century propaganda if you believe that, because of 20th century war historical evaluations made by people with inadequate historical understanding. The Persians attacked the Greeks, and of course, later, so did the Romans. Alexander was not a Democrat. Democracy does not need to be anti-intellectual. The United States is one of the best places for intellectual efforts, in spite of the broadcast media and government efforts to dumb things down. Anti-intellectual is a humanist trait rather than a democratic trait. In a free society, an intellectual may live in a tent, read Quine, while the unintellectual can visit Talladega for NASCAR and help advance global warming. They should use electric cars.